everyone. I am Melissa Forziat. I'm a keynote speaker and the host of this Halt and Catch Fire rewatch podcast. And when I speak, my topic is something I call Take the Doughnut, which for me is a way of saying carpe diem, seize the opportunity. The opportunity I wanted to seize this year was rewatching Halt and Catch Fire, but this time actually talking about it with real live humans. And I've up leveled that now because I'm getting a chance to talk with people who worked on the show. And before I introduce my guest for today, just a quick housekeeping item that may not be necessary for this one, but if you are brand new to the show, the interviews are not spoiler free. They could be spoiler filled. Now, granted, the episode coverage, we're just past this guest's episodes now, so maybe you've already seen it, but just be aware anything in the show could be brought up in this interview. Having said all of that, my guest for today, I am so excited to welcome Scott Michael Foster, who played Hunt Whitmarsh in 7 episodes of season 1. Welcome.
Thank you so much for having me.
It is such a blast to talk with you. And like I just said, we're now into season 2 in the rewatch, but all of your episodes were in season 1. So I feel like we've really gotten a chance to deep dive into the arc of Hunt Whitmarsh. And before we get into the episodes, I'm curious how you got connected with this show. What brought you to Halt and Catch Fire to begin with?
Well, as a working actor, we take the appointments as they're given to us and we decide whether we want to do the work or not. And this one was such a great one because I'm sure at the time AMC was sort of king of television alongside, HBO, and it was just the golden age of TV. And they were doing such great shows like Breaking Bad and Mad Men. And so, to be a part of that universe felt really not only interesting as an actor, but just everyone was watching. So I wanted to be a part of that. So when that came across my desk, I sort of gave it my everything. And then Sharon and Sherry, the casting directors, brought me in, and I did the scenes, and they asked where I was from, and I was like, well, I was born in Illinois, but I was raised in Dallas, and they were like, oh, great, because this takes place there, and I didn't know that at the time. I don't think in my scenes it mentioned anything about that. So, I was, I think they were like, can you just, do your Dallas accent? So I did, and that was that. So, yeah, it was just one of those. It was just not how it is now, where you put yourself on tape and then hopefully you'll go in the room or whatever. This was in person with casting, and it just seemed to be a right fit from the get-go.
That sounds amazing. And it was just perfect that you were from the very area that this show is supposed
Exactly.
to be about. That's
And my
fortuitous.
father worked at IBM for 30 plus years. So, I remember him bringing home computers from the late 80s, early 90s and tinkering around with them. And so, I had a lot of connection to that world.
That's interesting. Is that the kind of thing that would come up in the casting process as well?
Not really, but it was, after the fact, just, I think, good for me to build off with the character, having had that history with my dad working at IBM, because he had all the knowledge in the world about it.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, at this point in your career, you've been part of so many different projects, so many different TV shows. What do you remember about this show? Is there anything that stands out to you as being unique on about being on this particular set?
It was my first time shooting in Atlanta, so I really enjoyed that, having never filmed there before. The crew and the entire cast, everybody was incredible to work with, which is all you can hope for on a show. Obviously, if it's a good quality show, you want everyone that's working on it to also be of good caliber, and everybody was great. So I really appreciated that. As far as the show or the type of filming we did, I mean, that was all pretty standard. The thing that really sticks out in my mind, because again, this is 10 years ago now that we shot, which is crazy to say it was 10 years ago, but what really sticks out in my mind was, it was I don't know, you probably don't remember, but there was a blizzard in Atlanta in February. And they don't really get blizzards in Atlanta. I'm sure people will know that, but they had one while I was there in February. We were filming, and we left one night. I was in a shuttle with the AD, the director, and the truck driver, and we got on the freeway to go back downtown where my hotel was, and it just completely dead stopped. Snow all over the freeway. Couldn't move for a couple hours. We were just stuck on the freeway. And it was like at the end of a long day, we all wanted to get home and go to bed because we had to get up early the next day. And at one point, I was just like, I'm just gonna get out and walk because we're not moving at all. And so this snow-covered freeway full of cars, I just got out and I walked between the cars. I got to the front and there were cars spun out sideways. People were trying to get off the road. I helped some people, but it was like kind of fruitless. They just couldn't get their cars off the road. So I was like, well, see you later. Have, good luck. Kept walking, and it was like The Walking Dead because I was on an empty freeway in Atlanta, staring at the downtown skyline, walking alone on a snow-covered 8-lane freeway. And I walked all the way back. I exited the exit and I walked all the way to my hotel. And I got home before anybody else. So that's like my big memory of working on this show in Atlanta 10 years ago. It was during a blizzard that Atlanta was just not prepared for.
I
So
was
that's
just thinking about The Walking Dead when you were describing that. It sounds post-apocalyptic.
that's exactly what it was like. Yes, it was a
it's,
post-apocalyptic.
it's one of those memories that was downright uncomfortable when it was happening, but it's like the thing that sticks with you.
Totally.
It's so strange.
Yeah, it was bizarre, and like I said, I wish I had more to say about the actual show, but this is the one thing that everyone's like, "How's Halt and Catch Fire?" I was like, "There was a blizzard." Like that's the first thing I always say when someone brings it up.
It's funny though, because now that I've done a few interviews, the first one that I did was with Morgan Hinkleman and Alana Kavanaugh, who played young Joni and Haley, and they were
Right.
little when this
Right.
show was filming, and they were like, "It snowed," and they stopped filming so we could have a
Yeah.
snowball fight. Everybody remembers the
It was
snow.
crazy. The snowstorm must have been a pivotal moment for everybody in that show because it
Yeah.
really threw the city into chaos. It was wild.
Oh boy. Well, if we talk a little bit about Hunt here, Hunt takes quite a turn.
Sure.
In the 7 episodes you did, he starts in one place, he ends up in a very different place. And I'm curious how much you knew about him when you took the role on, or even how long you thought you were going to be on the show for.
I don't remember if they told me how many episodes I was doing. A lot of times you'll know as a recurring whether you're going to do 7 out of 10 or 3 episodes. Or, I might have known, but I don't remember them ever really telling me his arc. I mean, I knew a little bit about where they wanted to go, and I knew a little bit about his relationship with Donna at the very beginning, but they didn't. I wasn't aware really of where his character ends up with the betrayal and the slingshot and everything. That all kind of I learned as I was getting scripts, and so I was also sort of learning about it as I went along.
I think it kind of works. I mean, I'll ask more questions about it, but I kind of feel like he just sort of took opportunities as they came. But I don't know. I think that'll be interesting for us to talk about a little bit as we go here. I guess first of all, in terms of that connection with Donna, because obviously that was the primary relationship that you had to a main character in the show with Carrie Bechet. So the first time we get substantial information about Hunt, it's episode 3 of season 1, High Plains Hardware. We get a kind of a lot of backstory in a quick exchange that they have where we find out that you're Donna's new supervisor, that you just moved back into the area, that you're married to a Canadian woman. And we find out that Hunt and Donna knew each other in high school. She was a xylophonist, and he makes reference to her parents coming to the game. So I'm guessing he was also in the band.
I don't remember exactly if that. I remember, or he played and he was on the team while she played the halftime show or something like that. You're right though that he makes reference to her being at the games with him.
Yeah. So there was a connection there. What do you think that connection is between Hunt and Donna at the start of the show? How close do you think they actually are? Is it a coincidence that he happens to be her supervisor now? Like, did you ever come up with backstory for that?
Yeah, I never played it as he tried to infiltrate the company to use Donna. I always played it as he got this job, saw that there was an opportunity in front of him and took it. Not that he had planned it in some Machiavellian way. You know, as far as their relationship, I often like I think about people you knew in high school. Now, if you saw them either today or at a foreign country, would you say hi? Would you go up to them and say something? There's a lot of people I would, but there are some people that I didn't know well enough to go up. I would graduate with 1,000 people. So, it's like there are people that I wouldn't necessarily reach out to just because I didn't know them at all. Um, I think I think Donna and Hunt are more than that, but not necessarily. They weren't friends in school. You know what I mean? It's some sort in between. So I don't know if there was a lot to base on their relationship before they started working together here. But definitely an acquaintance enough that you could, you know, easily, like he does, call her at home and maybe reminisce a little bit and use those little things to his advantage.
So it's sort of like they get back to familiar territory quickly, but you don't have a feeling like they stayed in touch all of those years. Doesn't sound
No,
like.
not really. I mean, it sounds like it was a surprise, to see some I'm sure they're in their late 20s here, and so it's like seeing someone after 10 years. You're like, oh yeah, we went to high school together. Isn't that odd that we're both working in the same workplace now? Not that they were like, they didn't keep up as at that point pen pals, not even Facebook, which
Hmm.
I think was, it takes a little bit more effort at that point.
It sure did. It's easy to
Hmm.
forget that now.
Hmm. Yeah.
Like it was almost impossible to know what anybody else was up to at
You
that
would
time.
graduate and then you would never see anybody ever again. It's just like you'd wonder until you went to a reunion. That was it.
Yeah. The world really has changed.
Yes, sure has.
Yeah. One of the really interesting connections that happens in this show, and I've got to say, I didn't see this coming, not one bit, is this connection we get between Hunt and Brian. Brian being, Donna and Gordon's neighbor, who also worked at Cardiff Electric and ends up getting fired by Gordon and has an axe to grind for sure. So it's interesting to me that your character and that character connect and ultimately end up coming up with a competing product. And when I really look at the arc for your character, it wasn't until maybe like episode 5 or 6 that I even start to feel a shift in how much information you seem to be gathering from Donna. So I'm curious if there was a point when you started getting these scripts where the directive kind of changed for you. Like when did you start saying, oh, we're taking a left turn on this one?
It's going to be hard to pinpoint exactly when that happened in my mind, but as far as Brian, played by the fantastic Will Greenberg, who had me chuckling the whole time we were on set. He's hilarious. I think you could look at it two ways. You could look at it that Brian reached out to Hunt saying, I want to get back at them. We have this opportunity. Let's seize it. You could also look at Hunt reaching out to Brian saying, I'm seeing what we have here in the office and you're disgruntled. So I can probably pick your brain too. So I think the way I ended up playing it was that Hunt reached out to Brian and wanted to use his expertise and say, hey, team up with me. I'm inside. You've got stuff that happened before I arrived. Let's team up and make this happen. So again, this was a long time ago, and I'm just thinking very broadly here about sort of backstory. But yeah, I imagine that it was sort of it was Hunt's directive to team up with Brian and do this.
That's super
You asked
interesting.
you
I
asked something else. Yeah, sorry.
Yeah, like no, that's super interesting. I think my initial guess was the reverse, where
Yeah.
feels like Brian is so angry. He's
Hmm.
lost his mind. And
Right.
then I asked myself, well, how would he even know how to find Hunt?
Right.
So it is interesting if I flip my paradigm that I created for myself, it probably makes more sense to be able to say, like,
Because
Hunt knows where Donna lives.
right, right. Hunt knows where Donna lives. Hunt knew that he worked there. I'm assuming, having records in the office. Brian being gone probably wouldn't know who the new supervisor is. So just some of those things I never got a straight answer. They didn't tell me one way or the other. It was just, this is what happens, so you kind of have to fill in the gaps a little bit. So I guess it could be up to interpretation. It's kind of how I took it, that Hunt would reach out to someone who he saw as disgruntled, who would do anything to help this effort, and saw that as an opportunity that he had to seize.
That's cool. I have to
Yeah.
rethink this because that makes actually a lot of sense now that you're saying this.
Yeah.
So yeah.
But like, again, it's up to interpretation, because there's no right or wrong answer.
And who knows what Donna said to him, because she's
Mhm.
given up a lot of information.
Right.
So like,
Right. Exactly.
who knows what she said about her neighbors.
Mhm.
But okay, that's pretty cool. Well, in terms of that relationship with Donna,
Yeah.
as things start to shift with Hunt, there's a key scene where you referenced it earlier. Hunt calls Donna at home, gets her in the middle of making a peach pie, and she becomes so flirty, and Hunt's getting flirty. But it's interesting because the actual shot of this is from when we see your character, the camera is behind you,
Mm-hmm.
and your ring finger, your wedding ring, is in frame,
Right.
very specifically, it feels like.
Yeah.
And we've been told that Hunt is married, and yet here we're getting this much more significant flirting that's happening.
Right.
So I guess, what does the show want us to know about Hunt? What was the way that you all were trying to play that? I mean, it is such a specific camera angle, and
Yeah.
I thought that was of note.
Yeah, it is. I mean, from what I remember, that was a pretty important scene that they wanted to make sure they got right, which was to show that Hunt obviously is married. He said that. They want to reinforce that. Um, there's a bit of flirting going on. Now, is that something that is genuine? Is this just a budding potential affair, between these two? Because you don't even know at this point that he's doing what he's doing. Not really. And so, at least in my mind, when I was reading these, it was, oh, these two are going to have an affair. You know, but now when you go back on second viewing, it's is he buttering her up so that he has further access to information? Um, and so, like you said, the shot of showing the ring, and I think his feet are up on the desk, and it's very relaxed, and they're talking about peach pie, and I remember they were like, because maybe my accent was slipping or something in that scene, because they were like, we want you to really hit peach pie with the accent, like really hit peach
You
pie,
both
and
did.
yeah, so I just remember, I
I
don't
was like,
I don't know,
wow,
that's
what's
something they
Donna
really wanted
doing?
to to zone in on that, but they really wanted that. So it felt like they were really building this moment of, I think they wanted to portray it as a potential love affair, but in the end, in the reality, it was, I think anyway, whether he had ever had any sort of feelings, because I mean, uh, somebody can be married and still think someone else is attractive, but I don't think that was his motivation here. But I'm sure he played into it. He played into the fact that she was responding to the flirting. And it only helped his cause. So
I was going to ask, by the end of this season, did you make a decision about that? So it sounds like you feel like it was manipulation, not real for
right,
him.
yeah, I think so, and I think the way that you come to that conclusion is, I don't remember which episode. I want to say it's it's got to be episode 8, when they're on the business trip, and they get to the hotel room door, and she thinks that he's coming in to start the affair, and he's taken aback, um and I think it's because he never wanted to cheat on his wife or have an affair. That was never his intent. His intent was to manipulate and maybe use the fact that she was attracted to his benefit, right? um but so sorry, I lost my train of thought, but essentially he never wanted to cheat on his wife, in my opinion. He didn't want to do that, and his shock when she goes in to kiss him shows that that was never part of the
Yeah. Well, the next episode after that one,
plan. Yeah.
what a cool episode, the Comdex episode, where we get the reveal. And
Mhm.
honestly, there are so many reveals we get in this show, but if I look back at the entirety of this whole series, the thing I saw coming the least was the reveal of the slingshot by
Yeah.
Hunt and Brian.
Mhm.
What a magnificent, and it makes sense too. Like it wasn't just for shock's sake. It's like the seeds were planted. You
Yeah,
just
breadcrumbs along the way. Yeah.
yeah. So, you know, I look at one of the things I love, first of all, there's the actual reveal. And I'm curious with that because it ends up being another very specifically shot scene where we're seeing sort of the back of Hunt and Brian as they're sort of delivering a pitch to a whole bunch of people in front of them. And then we're going to see across the room the team from Cardiff starting to walk in. It seems like a pretty big production in terms of filming that. I'm curious if you remember anything about that process.
That was wild because they built out this huge set that was looked like it was straight from 80s. What's the conference called? They sort of ripped on it. Consumer Electronics Show. CES, I think is what they called it. And I mean, I remember my dad going to those in the 80s and early 90s. So it was really accurate. It was a big production, a lot of detail, a lot of background. So it was a little intimidating and overwhelming to be there. But once you were there, you really felt like you were part of it, which was very cool. So that's what I can say about the set for sure.
Yeah, there's a real feeling of scope when you
Yeah,
first get the shots of that. It's like, no, we want you to see how big this is.
yeah.
And then it gets very personal. And then you get like the close ups on your face and Brian's face.
Hmm.
And then you're going to get the reaction shots of
Right,
everybody from Cardiff. And then the
right.
big reveal with the flip chart reveal.
Hmm.
You
Hmm.
know, and there it is, a product that looks just like the
Right.
Giant.
The copycat. Yeah.
Oh my goodness. So what I love about this episode, well, one of the things I love about this episode is that next scene we get with you where it's head to head, Joe and Hunt sitting at a
With Lee.
table,
Yeah.
hashing
Yeah.
it out. And it's interesting how much it sort of plays with your mind of like, who's the good person and who's the bad person here? Because what is Hunt doing? That's so different than what anybody else in this episode is doing.
Right.
But you go head to head with Lee Pace in this scene, and in this moment, Hunt wins.
Right.
Long term, maybe not, but
Right.
tell me about that scene. What was that sort of face off like?
Yeah, that was I was the most nervous about that scene just because it was such a pivotal climactic for Hunt's storyline scene, to shoot. And um, Lee was fantastic. I've been a fan of his forever. So, it was really, really exciting to sit down and work with him, and he was awesome. Not only just, off camera, but on camera, just a talent to watch. But yeah, it was one of those that I really wanted to get right because, he, like you said, he's not doing anything different than what Joe would have done. He's being a ruthless businessman, which, you know, for better or for worse, like you said, like who's winning, who's right or who's wrong. In business, especially as is what they're talking about in the 80s, it's like it feels like everyone's wrong. It's just who can get ahead, and that was the point I was trying to make. It's like, listen, this isn't personal, for better or for worse. I'm just doing what I have to do to get ahead, and that's all it was. So, I think you can't really call either of them a good or bad guy. They're just doing what they need to do to stay ahead of the race.
It's interesting because that episode for the first time in the series really made me sort of sit with my feelings. I was like, why
Yeah.
do I think this is such a villain character when literally 20 minutes before that same episode, Joe is sitting at a table with two other people doing the same thing to them, the
Right.
same table, and then you come
Right.
away and it's like, okay, why do I feel like Hunt's the bad guy here?
Yeah. Yeah.
It's an interesting thing that you have to really sort of sit with.
It's because you've been following Joe and Cardiff Giant, ever since episode one, and all of a sudden Hunt, who you think is one thing, turns out to be another, comes in, swoops in, and that changes your perception of things. It's so, like I said, there are no good and bad guys. It's just who's gonna do whatever it takes to get ahead, and that's what both of them do.
Absolutely. We know that after this, the Cardiff Giant, they end up changing their product just enough where they end up getting the big contract with Computerland that Hunt and
Yeah.
Brian thought they were going to get. So
Right.
it what do you think happens to Hunt after? You know, like where do you think he ends up 5 years later, post Comdex? What's going on for him now?
Yeah, who knows really? I mean, I think you could look at it and say, uh, what 5 years later is the early '90s, right? The internet. I'm sure he's still in the business world of computing. I think he's still there. Um, but who knows? It could be anything. I haven't really given that much thought. Um,
And it's
but
not
it
on the
re
page, right? I mean, I
Yeah,
think
no, it's not.
he must have left the company. He must have left TI.
Right.
But maybe he could get another middle management position there,
I mean,
unless
I think
they.
he quits at the end of season one, correct? I mean, he's sort of
Yeah,
he
he
walks
quit to
away.
go to Comdex. He had resigned, but he was middle management. It seemed like
Right.
he was somebody they were maybe trying to groom.
Yeah.
But then he did like tell him to get out of the computing business and then tried to launch a product. So I
Right.
wonder what his reputation is in the industry.
Maybe we'll have to get a sequel series and figure out what's going on with
Spinoff.
that.
This is the spinoff everybody's asking for.
Yeah,
Let's
exactly.
get Brian and Hunt back
Yeah.
together.
Oh man, I'm sure they would make it at least half a season on some network somewhere.
Oh my goodness. Well, do you have any other? I mean, obviously there was the blizzard, but
Yeah.
are there any other experiences that you had on this set that you want to share, or any people that you worked with that you want to shout out either in front of or behind the camera?
Yeah. I mean, like I said before, the whole cast and crew were, it's not rare, but it's always appreciated when everyone behind the camera and in front work together in such good harmony, and are respectful professionals. You don't always get that. But this one was one of those examples that I couldn't say enough good things about. So I thank you to everyone who worked on it. Carrie Bichet in particular, because I spent most of my time with her. She was a true professional, and I really admired her for her work ethic and everything. So yeah, it was a fun experience. I can't believe been 10 years. I will say this. Um, One of the things that I wasn't really ready for, but was glad to experience was the costumes and the hair. I mean, I hadn't really ever done a period piece where everything was very meticulous. I talked a little bit about with the CES. They were very true to the time and very detailed, and the costumes were incredible. The hair and makeup incredible, and it makes it so that you can really step into the character, and it does some of the heavy lifting for you when you look like you're from that time. I was actually shooting another show at the same time. I was going back and forth between Atlanta and LA, and my character in the show I was doing in LA had short hair, scruffy. He was supposed to be like this good looking roguish guy, and I couldn't cut it. I couldn't do that, so I had to grow it out for Halt and Catch Fire. And my hair in that show was like parted, and it was like fluffy over the ears, how it was in the '80s, and I just didn't think it was my best look. And I would go back to LA, and they'd be like, "How do we make this work? Because it's not, it doesn't look good." And so, even the lead actress on that show was like, "So when are you done with Halt and Catch Fire? When can we cut your hair?" Because I just looked so silly. But it was super fun to be doing that kind of work in a period piece. It's something I hadn't really done to that degree before. So that was a wonderful experience.
It's interesting too, because a lot of times when I think about a period piece, I default to like
The
corsets and
1800s, yeah,
yeah, like
yeah,
and then to have a period piece that's actually a time that we remember.
hmm yeah,
Were there any nostalgic elements of that for you? Obviously, reminding you of your father's work.
yeah, yeah.
What other
That I
nostalgia came
mean,
up?
we moved to Dallas in the early '90s. That's when he started working for IBM there. He'd worked at IBM in Chicago. This is where we were before. But so just seeing Dallas in the '80s, in the computer world, it very much felt like being a kid. So that was a bit crazy for me, to see like we're making this world that I had lived in, essentially as a young kid, and to see it on screen in such detail was really cool and interesting.
Yeah. Well, is there anything that you're working on now that you can share that you want to tell us about? We can all go find you there.
Yeah, so the last thing I had come out was an independent film that I produced with my friends, Kevin Bigley and Kate Cobb, who wrote and directed the movie respectively, called Oki. It just premiered at the Santa Barbara International Film Festival, which was a great experience. Felt we were well received. We'll be at Phoenix next month, and hopefully we'll get distribution within the next 6 months or so, and that way everyone can see it. But I think we have an Instagram page, Oki Film, that you can go check out if you want to see a trailer or some stills from the shoot.
Oh, that's awesome. Good luck with
Yeah,
that project. It sounds like it's
thanks.
just in the early stages of getting it out
Yeah,
there.
yeah. Hopefully we'll get some distribution so people can see it, because it's a great little film that we worked hard on. So big things. Hopefully.
Oh, that's wonderful. Well, thank you so much for taking time to think about a show you worked on 10 years ago that we all still love. It's so fun to hear just some of the backstory about what people's experiences were on set and, hearing about a blizzard from a different angle.
Oh, it's so funny that other people brought that up too. Yeah, thank you for having me. I appreciate it. It's been fun to go down memory lane with this for a little bit.
Absolutely. Well, okay, everybody, you know what to do. Go out there and watch Halt and Catch Fire. Bye, everyone.